What's going on, guys? Welcome into On Deck. Thank you all for tuning in. We've got a lot to talk about surrounding the Atlanta Braves today. First off, we're going to give you a spring training look ahead. I think that's most important as of right now. Got a lot of notes to get through. Going to try to get to your comments as much as I possibly can. Forgive me if I don't, though. Like I said, a lot of stuff to get through. We're going to talk about the starting pitcher. We're going to talk about the bullpen. We're going to talk about everything that we can moving into spring training. By the way, spring training, pitchers and catchers report on Wednesday. So a lot to get through. So let's start off. Let's just go ahead and talk about starting pitching because, frankly, the starting pitching got practically all of the attention early on for the Braves. A lot of guys were talking about Trevor Bauer possibly coming to the Braves. There's a lot of hype around what the Braves could do with starting pitching. To me, I think the Braves made the right moves. I think they certainly could have gotten Trevor Bauer, but with that salary, the Braves are free to do a lot more. So with starting pitching, the Braves, again, have made most of their adjustments in starting pitching. Rightfully so. We saw it last year when Soroka went down. Everybody was fearful of what the Braves were going to be after that. Charlie Morton is a guy that I think could be very good for the Braves. One, he's a veteran. I think that is very important on a young staff. He's had great success in Tampa and even Houston. I know we don't like to count that, but he did have success there too. And I don't need Charlie Morton to be an ace. I don't need him to be our number one. I need him to be a solid pitcher. If he's a solid starting pitcher that can give me 6 innings every game, I'm happy. And keep it, within reach, I'm more than happy. I think he can be a solid starter. And more than that, I think he will be more than that. There's no reason to think he won't be all-star level. He has been in the past few years. We got a lot to talk about today, guys. I promise I'm going to get to that Kipnis news. But I think Charlie Morton is going to be the veteran on the staff, and I wouldn't underestimate him. A lot of people are kind of just pushing it to the wayside. When the Ozuna thing was happening, a lot of people were saying, well, the Braves haven't done anything. No, they went and got Charlie Morton, and they went and got another guy. His name's Drew Smyly. If you hadn't heard of Drew Smyly, go check him out. He's worth taking a look at. I want to see in spring training with Drew Smyly, what I want to see out of him is what the Braves are looking for. Anthopoulos said he expects Drew Smyly's best years are in his next few. I want to see that this season, and that all starts at spring training, obviously. So I expect to see kind of the usual out of Max Fried. I don't think there's any reason to not expect some result better than last year. He had a very good year last year. At one point, he was 7-0, I think. Obviously, he carried the Braves through that 60-game season without Mike Soroka until Ian Anderson got there and began helping out with the taking over some of those innings. But I don't want to gloss those two guys over. Max Fried and Ian Anderson, obviously we just assume they're going to be good, but they're the ones I'm least worried about. I think that's fair to say. Ian Anderson showed an unbelievable amount of skill last year on a rookie season, and there's no reason to think he won't be that good or even better this year. However, I think he'll probably have some bumps. Every pitcher does, especially being that young. But, I expect to see him develop this year and become what we've seen Mike Soroka become and what we've seen Max Fried become in the past few years. I think there's no reason to not expect that out of Ian Anderson. Mike Soroka is the other guy we got to talk about in the starting rotation. With Mike Soroka in spring training, I'm not expecting him to have just an outstanding spring training. What I want to know out of Mike Soroka is a timetable. I want to know when he's going to be ready. Is it going to be 3 weeks into the season? Is it going to be a month into the season? Or is it going to be the All-Star break? Because those are three very different things. As a rookie, Mike Soroka kind of blew the world up. Somebody even made a song about him. He was very good, and he was very good before he got hurt. He was, frankly, Max Fried sort of took up the mantle, but he was better than Max Fried at that time. So I want to see him come back, and again, I hope to see him have a full recovery. There's no reason to expect that he wouldn't, but hopefully that will be the case here pretty soon. In terms of the entire staff, there are 3 Cy Young candidates, genuinely, that I believe on the Braves staff right now. Max Fried, Mike Soroka, and I would throw Ian Anderson in there in terms of Cy Young candidates moving forward this year, next year, and the year after that. I don't think there's any reason to not think those guys have that potential. Based on what we saw last year, Ian Anderson has a very high ceiling that I don't think he's quite reached yet. And I think we're going to see that this year, and I hope to see some results of that in spring training. But I think this is a well-built staff. Hopefully it'll keep intact going forward, not like last year. Hopefully it will be able to stay healthy, stay you know, stay as talented as we know they are and perform like they did last year. So I think what the Braves did last year with the little starting pitching they had was very impressive. I can't wait to see what they do with the staff of, frankly, Mike Soroka, Max Fried, Drew Smyly, Charlie Morton, and Drew Smyly. I think they're going to be very, very good with that crew. So let's talk about the bullpen going into spring training. At the moment, there's a few open spots in the pen, right now. We're losing we already lost Melanson, that's for a fact. We haven't re-signed Shane Green, so that's yet to be seen. But there's a rose gallery of guys within the minors that we already have that can fill that role. Right now in the bullpen, there's obviously A.J. Minter, Chris Martin, Josh Tomlin, Tyler Matzik, Will Smith, and probably Jacob Webb. I'm going to throw all those guys in there. A lot of familiar faces. But there's also a lot of familiar faces that don't necessarily have a role at the moment. I see you guys talking about him in the chat. One guy is Bryce Wilson. And, another guy that I would kind of put in the same hat as Bryce Wilson is Kyle Wright. Starting experience already, but they've shown that they're probably better in the bullpen role as of right now. I think they can adapt to that, and I'd like to see how they adapt to that in spring training and if they can be successful in relief because, I think those are guys that could be starters, but I think they're, at the moment, with our starting pitching depth that we have at the moment, they might start the season as a starter if Mike Soroka is not ready, one or the other, either being Kyle Wright, Bryce Wilson. If not, if Mike Soroka is ready to go, I think you see those guys move to the bullpen. And if the Braves don't re-sign Shane Green, that might be the move they make. But we're going to have to wait and see on that. But I also think you got to see Huascar Ynoa, you got to see Patrick Weigel, Tucker Davidson, Philip Pfeiffer, Kyle Muller. At some point, any of those guys could get called up to the big leagues. You got to see them in spring training. You got to at least see a showcase. And, frankly, they're the depth that the Braves have. The other guy, Luke Jackson, is making $2 million this year. I need to see some development in him early on so that I can trust him in relief. No knock on him, but when you're making that kind of money, you're in all the headlines in the offseason of, asking why, and fairly asking why. Frankly, a lot of you guys were throwing his name around angrily on Twitter. And hopefully we'll see some things in the spring that give us all just a little bit more comfort with him coming out of the pen. He's a guy that puts us all on pins and needles. And hopefully we'll see a little bit more consistency and not so many base runners. That's the biggest thing. Sean Newcomb. This is kind of a guy that I'm pulling out the back here. Sean Newcomb is a guy that I think can still be effective. And I think he can be effective out of the pen. I really think he is a guy that can find himself quickly, make some quick adjustments, and get back to what he was. I want to see him, one, get that opportunity, and two, make the most out of it. And don't act like I'm crazy. I know there's been a lot of talk about Sean Newcomb in the same regard as, Mike Fultonevich, in terms of how you guys feel about it. But we've seen that kind of thing happen. A.J. Minter, 2 years ago, was far from what A.J. Minter was last season. So I think there are a lot of guys that deserve another shot, Sean Newcomb being one of them. Touki Toussaint, last year he had some ups and downs, but those ups at the time were really good. Definitely compared to what the Braves had at the time, i.e. Tommy Malone, Robbie Erlin. So you compare that to what Touki did, and he had one really good start. I remember watching it vividly. We were all rooting for him. I remember we were hoping maybe Touki can be what Mike Soroka was. I think there's real depth in pitching for the Braves. Some is unknown, but I truly think that we have some depth for years to come. Think about the names I just mentioned. Huascar Ynoa, Patrick Weigel, Tucker Davidson, Philip Pfeiffer, Kyle Muller. Those guys have yet to hit the majors. Okay, a lot of them. Huascar Ynoa we've seen, but we haven't really seen him take over a mantle. I thought he'd be a closer because he throws gas. But he's got to control his fastball a little bit. You guys love to talk about Tucker Davidson. Every video I posted in regards to Tucker Davidson was well viewed, and you guys really hit the mark on it. Kyle Muller's a guy that really has impressed me. I remember watching him face off against Ian Anderson actually in a pregame thing that the Braves aired, and it was very impressive. I think he's a guy that we could see very soon, and especially if Mike Soroka's not ready, it wouldn't surprise me if any of those guys got the call. Bryce Wilson included, Kyle Muller, Kyle Wright included, a lot of them. But what I really want to see, aside from pitching, we got to talk about the offense. So last year, the Braves shook the landscape of Major League Baseball in 2020 in terms of their offense. I want to see a repeat. I want to see an offensive aftershock. You brought back Ozuna, right? I have very little doubts of what Ozuna will be this year. There's no reason to doubt what he'll be. Could it be a repeat of last year? That's going to be very hard to do. I mean, he put up MVP level numbers, as did Freddie. It's going to be very hard to repeat it, but I think they can be almost as successful, and I think that that's going to be enough. And if they're as successful, they're a shredder. But I think our offense is one of the best in baseball. And think about the names on the lineup right now: Freddie Freeman, Marcell Ozuna, Ronald Acuna, Travis d'Arnaud. And then at the bottom, you got Ozzie Albies, Dansby Swanson, Austin Riley. I'll throw him in there. You got a lot of guys that have a lot of upside that's yet to really be reached. I really think I have no real reason to worry about the Braves' offense. The guys I want to see in this order have a great spring. Number one has to be Austin Riley. And I have my reasons, but Austin Riley, the headlines are all over this guy, right? All over this guy's potential development. You're commenting in the comments. I mean, all the time we're talking about what Austin Riley can be. Will he be traded for another guy that's already proven? I really think Austin Riley is the current and future third baseman for the Braves. But I do want to see some consistency. I do want to see that. And we've seen moments. I mean, think about, his debut. Think about those 18 homers within the first month of him showing up to the Braves. There's a lot you can think about. But I really think that there is a solid and consistent hitter in Austin Riley. I really think that we've seen moments. I think, that consistency is waiting to be unlocked. And I think we're hopefully going to see it this year. I think this year is going to be a cornerstone for what his career is going to be. Number two is Christian Pache. After his Major League debut and his postseason debut, frankly, he's easily one of the most anticipated guys technically in the minors at the start of this season for the Braves. His development in the spring is key to his success this year, I believe. I really think that whether he be starting for the Braves on opening day or a month into the season, I think we're going to see some greatness out of him in spring training. Obviously, he's going to get that spring training invite. I think he's going to prove himself there. He's going to prove to be the center fielder for the Braves. He's got a lot of upside to him, a lot to be excited about. His bat's gaining some power. Frankly, he hit a postseason home run last year. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he did hit a postseason home run. The guy's got a lot of power. He's got a lot of exciting things to come. I really think that. Number three is William Contreras. And without a doubt, Contreras will see time this year at the catching position, whether he be the only one or not. Shane Langoliers is up there. Alex Jackson is, of course, in the conversation. We saw a little bit of Contreras last year during the early part of the year when Tyler Flowers and Travis d'Arnaud both got exposed to COVID. They brought in William Contreras to handle the catching for about a week or so. But spring training will give good insight into what you can expect out of him behind the plate, what you can expect out of him in the box. I really think that William Contreras is the future for the Braves at the catching position, along with Shea Langoliers. I think those two guys are studs, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But I think the offense is. I'm not even worried about the offense, frankly. After last year, we're keeping a lot of the same pieces. There's no real reason to worry about the offense. Can they do what they did last year? It's going to be tough. Of course, it's also a different format in the season. You're going from 60 games to 162. There's a lot of changes, and it's going to be interesting to see how that translates. Last year was a sprint. This is a marathon. It's obviously very different, but I'm not worried about the offense. I think there are other facets to worry about, one being the bullpen and just figuring out the competition there. I think we're going to see a lot of different faces in the bullpen. There's nothing wrong with that. Bullpens are kind of meant to be cobbled together. If you got a strong starting pitching, which the Braves do as of right now, I think the bullpen's going to be just fine. Not to mention, you're moving a lot of guys that were starting for the Braves last year, got a lot of great experience. Let's be real here. Bryce Wilson getting postseason experience when he was in the minors earlier in the year is a major deal. I think the other thing that's got to be looked at is the Braves bench, which we're going to talk about a major move they made today in regards to the bench. But as much as there is competition in the bullpen, I think there's real competition in the bench. It's open season, because unless the Braves move to improve the bench even further, there's two guys on it right now in my mind, one being Johan Camargo and two being Jason Kipnis, which if you read the bottom of the screen, Jason Kipnis was signed to a minor league deal to the Braves today. The other guy being Johan Camargo. Johan Camargo is very versatile, and his offensive production firmly puts him on that bench right now in my mind, unless he's a trade piece. But Jason Kipnis, starting second baseman, he's not taking over Ozzie Albies' spot. I highly doubt that. So he's on a minor league deal. He's competing for that bench spot. He put up respectable numbers. I believe in 2019, the last full season he played, he had a 250 average, somewhere around 20 homers, and a 340 on-base percentage. He was doing pretty good. I really think he's going to be a great addition to the Braves bench, a much-needed addition to the Braves bench. Outside of that, assuming you have 2 more spots or so, there's the following list of players that I think could be competing for those spots. One being Ender Inciarte. He's more than likely going to start the season in center field to get an extra year of control on Christian Pache. The other one being Abraham Almani, Ihara Adrianza, Alex Jackson, Travis Demeritte, just picked up off of waivers out of Detroit. And he's also a former Braves. We talked about him in the last broadcast I brought to you. But I think there's a lot to be excited about. The bench battle is going to be very interesting, and I think you're going to see the most of it during spring training. Obviously, they're going to figure out what they need. And if you don't remember, last year they did a very similar thing. They brought in a couple extra first basemen. Yonder Alonso was on the Braves roster there for a while. He was up and down from the Gwinnett training site, because there were no minor leagues last year, so he was up and down from the Gwinnett training site. And, he's obviously not going to take over Freddie's spot, but there's got to be backups, right? If Freddie was to get hurt, obviously you need a backup. If Ozzie were to get hurt like he did last year, Jason Kipnis would be he would be a good fill-in. Last year, also, you're getting Ozzie Albies back, right, for a full season, which is a major addition. That's almost like a free agency addition. We got him back in the postseason last year. He is just getting into his flow as it ended, but I really think having him for a full season is going to make a world of difference. It's going to add even more depth to this lineup, and I really think that the Braves are set up for success. So, in closing, in terms of this, this spring training look ahead, last year, amidst the delays, I told you that the Braves were built for a sprint. And based on that Game 7 in the NLCS finale last year, I was right. They were built for a sprint, right? Even without starting pitching, they were. But right now, I think they're built for a marathon, and they're going to be just fine. Everybody's worried about the bullpen. Everybody's worried about the bench pieces, and I get it. There's reason to be concerned. But as I look at it more, as I think about it more, I really think the Braves are going to be in good shape. I think we're getting back to normal, and it'll be a good thing to see. A 162-game season is so much better than a 60-game season, because in a 60-game season, every game matters, which I agree is more entertaining. But in a 162-game season, you're seeing more of what we know as baseball. And I think that's going to be a great thing, and I think the Braves are going to be built for it. I think the biggest competition in the NL East at the moment is the Mets. And I know that's going to put a lot of bad taste in your mouth, but hear me out. The Mets have new ownership who, frankly, doesn't seem to mind spending money. And that's great. I honestly like the moves they've made. Francisco Lindor was the right move for them, I think. But I question if they're built like the Braves are, in terms of depth being top to bottom. Depth is something that comes up a lot when we talk about the Braves, and for good reason. The names that I just mentioned a few minutes ago are just scratching the surface of what the Braves have, in their minor leagues. Much less, these guys are just competing to get to the field. Much less what happens once they get there. I mean, this is the same process that got you guys like Ozzie Albies and Ronald Acuna on, frankly, sweetheart deals. Austin Riley's another one. Dansby Swanson's another one. Freddie Freeman, another one. It's the same exact process. So, a lot of your pitching, Mike Soroka, Max Fried, they're on like $2 million deals at the moment. The Mets aren't built like that. They're spending big money. The only other team I know of that spent money like they're spending at the moment is the Philadelphia Phillies. And when was the last time they won an NL East division? So I'm just throwing it out there. I really think that's your biggest competition, but I question how much depth they have. And the Braves certainly made some big moves this offseason. I think that gets overshadowed when you sign guys like Francisco Lindor. Marcell Ozuna was a huge deal for the Braves, frankly. The starting pitching fixes were bigger than a lot of people want to give it credit for. Charlie Morton is a very underrated guy, I think, in starting pitching. That was a solid move by Alex Anthopoulos. And I also think Drew Smyly has got potential to be very good this year. And again, not every pitcher is going to be Trevor Bauer. Not every pitcher is going to be a Cy Young winner, right? There's only one every season. But if you can have a functional, well-built 5-man rotation, you're going to be successful. And the Braves were so close last year. I mean, they were so close. They got past Cincinnati. They got past the Marlins. And they lost to the Dodgers in Game 7 after a 3-1 lead. I know, but their pitching was the downfall. And I really think that now that they have a well-built staff, I think they're going to be stronger than they were before. And frankly, have the same offense virtually. So I think that if we added another bench piece, which we did today, actually, that's nice. And it'd be nice to get another reliever, as Alex Anthopoulos has mentioned multiple times. But I don't think it's mandatory either. I know I've talked extensively about Shane Green and how much I'd like to get him back. That's because of how successful he was last year. But I think the Braves are the most well-built team top to bottom in the National League East and potentially on par with the Dodgers. And I know the Dodgers just signed Trevor Bauer, and that's a huge deal. But I think top to bottom they are on par with the Dodgers. They obviously were last year, and I think they have made a lot of big adjustments, and there will be a lot of exciting moments this year. All the big moments, they all start in spring training, though. So it's going to be fun to watch. Spring training again in 2 days. I hope you're ready. I know that the Braves are ready. And frankly, I can't wait to watch and start reporting to you guys what's going on again, because it's been a long time before I've actually, since I've actually got to talk baseball with you guys about something on the field. These past few months have been all in this room talking to you about, what the Braves could do. They've done some stuff. They made their adjustments, and now we get to talk about, what's going on. I'm going to get to the chat in just a minute. Super chats are appreciated, as you see down below. But, I want to talk baseball, so I'm going to talk a little bit more. I know a lot of you guys want to know about Kipnis, as Stellar brought up very early in the chat. Kipnis is going to be a very good move. I talked about him a minute ago, but I'm going to refocus on this. Kipnis, if you don't know who Kipnis is, Jason Kipnis is, I remember, frankly, my main memory of Jason Kipnis is watching him for the Indians in 2016. And, he was solid in the postseason. He was solid in the regular season. And everything's magnified in the postseason, right? So everybody's a little bit more of a star in the postseason, rightfully so. You made it there. You deserve to be on a higher pedestal. But Jason Kipnis is the guy. He's on our bench, guys. That's how much depth the Braves have. That's how good they are. He's another infielder alongside Johan Camargo. Johan Camargo potentially could play outfield too. But Kipnis is a guy you're going to need if somebody gets hurt, one. Two, there's no DH. You got to have a bench in the National League with no DH. So I really think that's a great move by Alex Anthopoulos. It's a very under-the-radar move, and I've told you multiple times I really like to go for those under-the-radar moves. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that if the results on the field are, frankly, just as good, if not better. If you can pull that off. Will Smith was the last... Before Marcell Ozuna, Will Smith was the last multi-million, multi-year deal I remember Alex Anthopoulos signing. Because Josh Donaldson was a one-year deal. Marcell Ozuna before this year was a one-year deal. I think that's the best formula for the Braves at the moment. Got a super chat. William, how do you think Chipper will help Austin and Pache at the plate? Well, Chipper Jones, it's no secret I like Chipper Jones. Chipper Jones is the guy I grew up watching. Chipper Jones, I think, has already helped Austin Riley in a lot of ways. I think he's, I know he's got this new role. I know, and that's very exciting. I'm very excited for it. But you can't tell me that Chipper Jones is sitting at home not being around the Braves, and when he's there, he's not sitting by the cage giving advice. You can't tell me that's not what's going on. I know that's what's going on. Because, frankly, every time we've seen him in any kind of documentary, I remember a few years ago, the Upton brothers, the year after Chipper retired, he's sitting by the cage trying to help B.J. Upton fix his swing. So you can't tell me he wasn't already doing that. I think it's more or less giving him a title, more of a reason to be there, and I think it's very good for the Braves to do so, honoring a guy that, frankly, carried the team for 20 years. So I think it's a very good thing. I think he could help those guys out a lot. Pache, I don't think necessarily needs help. I think he needs time. I think Austin Riley could use some help. I think he could use some suggestions. But Pache, I really think just needs some time to develop. He's not really brought in for his offensive prowess. He's brought in for his defensive prowess, primarily. But they're working on that bat. They're getting him some power, and I think he's going to be very good. He got a bunch of hits last year late that were meaningful, and I think I think they both could be stars of the future, and I think they will be. But I think Chipper is going to be a guy that can help them along the way, certainly. But yeah, Jason Kipnis, again, that's the biggest news out of Braves country today is for sure Jason Kipnis. Very good move, very solid move. Makes me question whether or not they're going to re-sign anyone else or, I don't know what they're going to do. It's on a minor league deal, so if he makes the roster, he's making $1 million. So you're really spending very little on him. Very similar to the Pablo Sandoval deal, but I think you're going to see a lot more playing time out of Jason Kipnis than you ever saw out of Pablo Sandoval, personally. It looks like Trevor Bauer has entered the chat. I don't know if you're the real Trevor Bauer, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Appreciate you, Chad. Braves, best team in the National League by Mantic Savage. I agree with you, but I do think the Mets are their biggest competition. Stellar says he is surprised Jackie Bradley Jr. hasn't signed yet. I wonder if we could get him cheap on a 1-year bench deal. I don't think, I mean, I'm not going to say I don't think so. I would be doubtful. I think the Braves outfield is pretty full at the moment. You got Pache, Acuna, Marcelo Zuna, maybe on a bench deal. Possibly, but I really think they're going to let the minor leagues figure that out at this point. But not a bad idea. I would be more apt to think Markakis, to be honest with you, just because they just spent $1 million on Jason Kipnis. They're not going to want to spend a ton of money on Jackie Bradley Jr. for a bench deal, and I think Jackie Bradley Jr. is more than likely looking for a multi-year, multi-million-dollar deal, and I really think that's more so where they're looking at the moment. Corey Yan, I hope I'm saying your name right. With our big name prospects starting to break into the league, who's a name you look to stand out in spring training? Well, I kind of just went through that. I gave you 3. Austin Riley, who I think you got to look at to see some development in. Christian Pache is a guy that I want to see some development in. Number 3 is William Contreras. And William Contreras isn't a guy that a lot of people outside of the guys that are knowledgeable, like, frankly, you guys, the guys that follow it like me pretty much every day. William Contreras is a guy that a lot of people don't know, and it's because, his brother's Wilson Contreras. So I think he obviously the family ties, automatically assume he's talented, and he is talented. He's very talented behind the plate. You've heard all the reports. I've seen him in spring training, and we saw him a little bit last year. I think he's a guy who's definitely going to have playing time this year. He's going to be your real new face. And I know we saw him last year, but it was like for a week or two, and it was at the beginning of the season. He's had another year to develop at that training site and in the off season. I think he's going to be my biggest focus offensively, just because I think we're going to see the most time out of him out of the minors, because in theory he plays every other day. Travis d'Arnaud's got to sit at some point. This isn't a 60-game season, it's 162. So in theory he plays every other day, maybe not as much. He might have a Flowers type role where he's not playing quite as much, just because Travis d'Arnaud has all that offensive production under his belt. But I think William Contreras is probably the name that is a big name prospect that's starting to break into the league. Obviously, you got Pache, but I personally think that William Contreras is the guy that I have my mind on at the moment. Bryce Wilson had a 33-4 record and threw 3 no-hitters in high school. Yeah, Manic Savage, I appreciate that. I didn't know that. But Bryce Wilson, I talked about him earlier. Bryce Wilson is a guy who has shown off talent. He's got a major league fastball. He's adapting to the major leagues. He's got to figure out some of those secondary pitches. But I don't think, there's no reason I think Bryce Wilson couldn't be very good. He can be very good. He is very good. He's just got to unlock it. And transitioning into the major leagues is not an easy thing to do. You don't see any rookies really coming up and just immediately having success. Unless their name is Ian Anderson. There's always some fall off. And Ian Anderson had a mild fall off, later into his year last year. But I think that Bryce Wilson is a guy who can adapt and really be effective late inning, 1 inning in the bullpen. I really think that is honestly where he's destined to be. Wonder what we get from Bryce Wilson and Kyle Wright this year. I do too. I can't wait to see that in spring training. Ian gets Rookie of the Year, Cy Young next year. Ian Anderson has shown off. He does have the potential to be an ace for years to come, as does Mike Soroka, as does Max Fried, and I think those guys really are going to show what they're made of this year. But there's a lot to be excited about. I think that you guys obviously know what's going on. You obviously follow the Braves, as do I, and I think that. I think it's going to be fun to see. I think spring training, honestly, is one of my favorite parts of the year. One, it's the time I finally feel alive. I got baseball to talk about again. But also, it's because there's so much unknown. There's so much waiting to be seen, so much to follow, so much updates that happen every day. Obviously, I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk to you guys every day, but I'm going to talk about it as much as I can on this channel. So, of course, if you're new here, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to this channel so you can keep along during spring training as much as possible. But again, spring training, I love going to spring training. If it's open to the public, which I'm actually not sure if it is, I'm going to try to take a trip down and see the new park, see, the environment. I love going around. Before coronavirus, it gave you the most, close-up interaction with players that you're ever going to get. If you want autographs, go to spring training. That's my best advice to you. You're going to get right there with them. You're going to see them up close and personal. You're going to talk to them. I think that's just one of the best experiences there is out there in Major League Baseball currently is spring training. And it's I think, honestly, if Major League Baseball was more like spring training, during the season, you'd have a lot more fans attend the games throughout. Just being that close up to the players, being able to, see. If you go to spring training, what you're going to get to see, and I don't know what the new setup at Cool today, but what you're going to get to see is the inner workings, right? First time I went, I am down in the not the main spring training site. You walk down to this major. At the time, it was at Disney, and it was just these 30 different fields, about 15, 30 fields, somewhere between that ballpark of just fields, and some were smaller than others, but they were used for different things. And then you walk down this little site, and it's like walking into a Little League. It's the clover leaf at a Little League, and you walk around. There's Mike Soroka. There's Colby Allard. There's Bobby Cox over there. Terry Pendleton. Javi Lopez. Freddie Gonzalez. I mean, not Freddie Gonzalez, but you get what I'm saying. They're all out there. And it's just Fred McGriff, Andrew Jones, Chipper Jones, Ralph Garr. Anybody you can think of, they're out there, and you're seeing those legends work with the young crew that we have now. And, you're just watching Mike Soroka literally watch a baseball game, watching those other guys. I actually watched Ian Anderson and Ian Anderson and William Contreras. They were pitcher and catcher, and then they pitched against and hit against each other. So I really think if you ever get the chance to go to spring training, trust me, go. Just don't ask any questions, just go. It's one of the best experiences out there as a fan. It is. If you haven't got to go, go. I really encourage you to go. Do you think the Braves will re-sign Shane Green? I've talked about this a lot on this channel, Mantic. I talked about it probably in the last broadcast, I'm pretty sure. Shane Green is a guy I'd love to bring back. He's a guy that was very effective in the bullpen last year. If I had the choice between him and Melanson, I would have picked Shane Green. I said that the other day. I'm going to make that clear, but I said that the other day. I would have picked Shane Green for sure because Shane Green has a lot more upside. If you were to sign one of those guys, the guy to go with, not to mention Melanson's fastball is kind of losing some traction. He's getting up there in age. He's 35. Shane Green, I think, still has plenty of time. And to me, especially in late innings, I need a guy that's pitching north of 95. 91 just doesn't cut it, and I think Shane Green could be that guy. I think Will Smith is going to have a much better year, though, this year, and maybe he'll take up a lot of that heat. I think the Braves are probably banking on Will Smith to have a better year, and he had a strange season last year. A very strange season. He started with COVID, didn't really get in until 20 games in or so. I think Will Smith has a much better year, and I think it's going to be very good to see because I don't know the exact details of his contract on top of my head, but I think he's going to be a lot of fun to see, and I think honestly with Will Smith, I think 3 to 4 years is a solid contract for him if that's what it is. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It's 3 to 4. But I personally think Will Smith has got a lot of upside to him, too, that we didn't really get to see last year. Do you think Kyle Wright will be in rotation? No, not unless Mike Soroka's not ready on opening day. At that point, I could see him or Bryce Wilson. But I think Kyle Wright will be a guy who, if somebody's hurt, could get called up to be in that rotation as the fifth man. But other than that, I don't see him in the rotation, considering the starters we got right now. Mike Soroka, Max Fried, Ian Anderson, Drew Smiley, Charlie Morton. I just don't think Kyle Wright's going to beat any of those guys out. Granted, I didn't think Mike Foltynewicz would be gone. I didn't think Sean Newcomb would be gone. I didn't think Cole Hamels would have the trouble he did last year. So it is what it is. But I really, anything can happen, especially over a 162-game season. But I really think Kyle Wright's destiny this season, at least, is going to be bullpen. There's nothing wrong with that. James Marshall says he's predicting a comeback year for Camargo. No clue what role he'll play. I'll die on this hill. You'll die on this hill. Well, I'll tell you, I actually met Johan Camargo. I actually interviewed him. If you're a really big fan, I suggest you go watch that interview. It's in Spanish, but I have a translator. Anyway, Camargo's a guy that I root for because I have met him. He was very nice to me, very accommodating to me personally, and he's a very humble guy, believe it or not. He's a guy, he thanked me for interviewing him, and I'm just some kid that got to interview him. But Johan Camargo is a guy that struggled. I think a lot of people get angry with him for quote-unquote not hustling. And I think if he puts his head to anything, he could do it. The problem with Johan Camargo, honestly, is that he's too good at too many things. And there's a lot of players like that. Charlie Culberson being another one. He's too good at too many things. So he doesn't have a set position, right? He wanted to be third baseman. That didn't happen. Potentially moved over to second base. That didn't happen. Outfield. That didn't happen. So he's become a bench bat by, being versatile. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's the problem you have when you're that kind of player if you want a set position. I think he's ultra talented. I think he's one of the most athletic people on the Braves. But, he does struggle on the bench in terms, when you don't hit every day, that's a struggle, to have that mindset. Obviously, the Braves have been lucky to have some guys that were able to do that. Charlie Culberson being one, Johan adapting to that to some degree. But I really think that his best role is to play every day, and hopefully that will be the case, with him and Jason Kipnis this year on the bench. Hopefully they will get to see playing time every day, because I think, honestly, that's why Culberson left, was because he wasn't used last year because there was a DH. Culberson had like 3 appearances, if that, last year. So I think Camargo will hopefully get a lot more time this season, and we'll be able to use the bench fully. I think having been a switch hitter, Chipper could help Camargo too. I think so. I think there's certainly some worth to that. I think Chipper is going to help a lot of those guys. Austin Riley, to me, being number 1. Riley's just got to be consistent. Chipper, if nothing else, Chipper was consistent. He had batting title, switch hitter, evenly dispersed over both sides of the plate. You've heard it all. He hit 300 from one side and hit 300 from the other. I think his consistency tips would be the number 1 thing for Austin Riley. He doesn't need anything in power. He's got power. We all remember 454-foot home run he hit. So he doesn't need power, but I think if we can work on his consistency, that would be the biggest deal for him. And I think it'll happen, personally. Do I think St. Louis wins the NL Central? Yeah, I would say so. The Cubs are kind of falling off at this point. The Cardinals have been good for some years now, though. I don't know. Well, the Brewers, I think, obviously the Reds took a big hit with Trevor Bauer leaving. Hello, Trevor. But, they took a big hit with, Trevor Bauer leaving. The Brewers are still a pretty good team. I think they, if Yelich pops off again, I think there's a lot that can happen there. But the Pirates aren't really hitting on much, and the Cubs are losing. They're not. The only headline you're hearing about the Cubs right now is that Chris Bryant's threatening to leave. So I think the Cardinals, not to say they're a shoo-in, but I think they're the Braves of the NL Central. I think that they're the most. If they didn't win, it kind of wouldn't make sense. So I would probably say so right at the moment. But who knows halfway through the season what happens. Do you think Kyle Wright and Ian Anderson will have a starting place this year? And what about Tookie? I think Ian Anderson will. I think Kyle Wright will be in the bullpen, and Tookie will hopefully get a chance to get a bullpen spot. Tookie kind of falls in line with a Sean Newcomb in a lot of ways. He's had his shots, and they just haven't really amounted to much long term. And I don't think a lot of it's necessarily his fault. I think he could be effective, out of the... I think Tookie could be effective in the 6-7 inning range. I don't really want him at 8th, 9th. I don't want him to become Luke Jackson a couple years ago. I really think it's going to be interesting. But and Kyle Wright's a guy I think it's definitely going to the bullpen. Too much talent there to waste. Ian Anderson's a guy that's going to the starting rotation, and Tookie's going to have a shot at the bullpen. How many at-bats do you think Camargo will get this year? I think he'll get at least one a game. Whenever they take that starting pitcher out, he'll get an at-bat. So if I had somewhere between 162 and 200, I hope. But I don't know. I think there could be days where he fills in at third. If Riley hits a slump, you'll see him at third. If Dansby, needs a break, you'll see him at shortstop. So I think it's gonna fluctuate. It's kind of hard to say, but if I had to guess, I'm saying north of 162. But who am I to guess really? Hi, Trevor. Let me see. I'm missing out on you guys. Anderson, Fried, and Soroka are the next Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz. I think that there's some worth to that. I don't like to compare players like that, especially 3-on-3. And it's really hard when you throw in a Greg Maddux in there. I think Greg Maddux is probably the best pitcher within my lifetime and probably since Nolan Ryan, easily, at least as a starter. Fried and Soroka were guys that, we knew were going to be good, and they are good. And we knew those three guys were going to be good. And I don't know if they'll have the same type of careers, but they're certainly hopefully going to have the same type of results for the Braves. And that, to me, is all that really matters. I really think it's interesting to see that. It's interesting to see how the Braves are building themselves, because it's very similar to how they did in the 90s. A lot of talent deep in the minors. And I actually asked Terry Pendleton about that a few years ago. I asked him, compared to the 90s, where are you guys at, right? I really think, I think they're closer than what he thinks personally, but he knows best. Terry Pendleton said that they were probably a lot deeper in the 90s, and that's fair to say. I think, the Braves are right there. I really think in terms of depth, there's nobody that's doing it better in the modern day. And I think the Braves have the most depth top to bottom. What contract would you give Johan Camargo to stay in Atlanta? I would give him 5-year, $25 million to stay here. I can't say that. I can't say I give him 5 years. He's a young player, but he just hasn't proven himself to get a 5-year deal. I really think he's more on the lines of like a two-year frame. In terms of the money, that's $5 million a year. That's not bad, but I just don't know how much long term I like. I'm not really a long term deal guy. I know that's kind of the popular thing to say at the time rather. I think that's kind of being on the Brave side of things. That's what they like to do. That's their mentality. I don't like long term either. I think that leads to a lot of problems. Leads to a lot of Bobby Bonillas, and I just don't think the Braves are really set for that. I think that really limits you. Ender Inciarte at the moment is making $8 million to ride the bench, So I really think, in terms of long term, I'm just not there yet with Johan Camargo. If Acuna, I was fine with that long term deal. That's a staple. That's the staple of your team. He's on backs of phone cases. People are buying his jerseys. I'm okay with that deal. I'm okay with the Ozzy Albies deal, but they're also super cheap. So it's interesting to see. I personally think Johan Camargo is going to be on a 2 to 3 year deal maximum. I don't even know what his contract situation is at the moment right now, Trinity. I appreciate your question, but I have to look at his contract before I can really give you a further answer. Brandy, I love this channel. Thank you, Tyler. I'm a new follower, and thanks to Chad Davis. Thank you, Chad. Thanks you for sharing. Yeah, if you can share this video, guys, I really appreciate it. I don't know how many likes. I'm looking at a screen where I can't tell, but do me a favor, like this video, share this out there. I do a lot of work. I put a lot of work into these live streams, and I really try to make the most out of it for you guys, and it's a lot of fun doing it, but it helps when more people watch it. I'll just leave it at that. So, also, super chats are, of course, appreciated. They're always appreciated, and they make my life a lot easier. So I do appreciate it. I'm going to answer the rest of these questions, and I'll probably wrap it up here in about 15 minutes or so is what I'm looking at right now. But, yeah, I think Johan Camargo is very talented, just not sold on the whole long-term deal. Nothing wrong with the money, though. I agree with that. But I'd be more apt for like a 2-year, $10 million than I would be a 5-year, $25 million. The Cardinals have surprisingly thin starting pitching, but I still think they win the Central. Yeah, but with the thin pitching, they do have thin pitching. I agree. There's just not any other team that sticks out in that division. The NL East is actually a very strong division. You got the Mets, who got DeGrom, they got Syndergaard, they got Lindor now. They have a pretty good team. Jeff McNeil's a guy I don't think gets enough credit. He's a lot like a Brett Gardner, a younger Brett Gardner. But I really think that team could be good. I think the Phillies have the potential to be good if they're still spending quote-unquote stupid money, but they got to deal with the Braves. And I don't think there's any team in that division that just sticks out to me like, yeah, they're gonna go to the postseason and they're gonna be successful there. Obviously, I had a different mindset with that a couple years ago when we frankly lost to the Cardinals in the postseason. But they have enough pitching to get through the regular season. I just don't see them doing so hot in the postseason when they have to deal with a team like the Braves that are frankly top to bottom full of depth once again. And depth means a lot more than than what people give it credit for. I think because somebody gets hurt, that could be the end of your season, as we saw last year. Trevor Bauer in the chat says the Reds should have gave him more money. LOL. Trevor, I think you made enough in LA, buddy. I really do. I think you're doing just fine. Kyle Wright is going to be a bullpen guy. He's always great the first time or two through the order, then gets blown up in the fourth almost every time. Yeah, I think that's more so people figuring him out, though. I don't think that's necessarily... Because I remember, like you just mentioned, I remember watching Kyle Wright every game, almost, and it'd be that situation. It'd be like, yes, we're through the fourth, and then the fourth inning, like you just said, he'd just get blown up. And, unfortunately, the memory I have is Game 3 NLCS 15-3 final score, and me sitting in the stands. So as much as I understand that, I think he's got some adjustments to be made. I think he's got a lot of adjustments to be made, and they're not unattainable. A very similar thing happened to Tom Glavine, I believe, in like 91 or 92, where he got blown up in a postseason like that, by 10 runs or so. And then the next year, he was like World Series MVP. So at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a bullpen guy that could flow into being a starter. Charlie Morton's only on a one-year deal. Drew Smiley's not on a very long-term deal. I think they're building around Soroka, Fried, and Anderson. But Kyle Wright's a guy I think they're, either could be a long relief guy or, could be a starter at some point. I just don't think that time's right now. I think the same could be said for Bryce Wilson. He's a guy that, again, just gets blown up all of a sudden. And it's unfortunate, but it happens to guys, that are just breaking into the league. I think the Braves, this is Trinity, I think the Braves should bring in Andrew Jones, just like Chipper, and he would be great for our outfielders and young players to look up to. Well, if you remember, the Braves actually did a very similar thing to what they just did with Chipper. They brought him in as like a special assistant to be around the Braves. And they did that with Andrew Jones, too, but I think it was primarily for spring training. Look, these guys are around the program. I talked a few minutes ago about how much I love going to spring training. And, again, it's because you see guys out there. Bobby Cox is out there. Prayers for Bobby at the moment. I don't have an update on his condition, but Bobby Cox is out there. Ralph Garr's out there. Fred McGriff's out there. Andrew Jones is out there. Chipper's out there. They're all out there, taking a vacation down to Florida and looking at the team because that's what they love to do. But I think Chipper just got a title put on him. I think Chipper, personally, I think Chipper might have went to him and said, "I want a role," and they gave him one. A more solidified role. But, it's going to be interesting to see. I think, when Chipper speaks, people listen. I think the same could be said with Andrew. Andrew's another guy I actually met and interviewed, and he knows his defense, man. All it takes is one highlight reel to tell you that. But Andrew's a guy I think that could relate to guys like Acuna and even Albies, in terms of defense. I know he's not an outfielder, but, Andrew Jones actually runs baseball tournaments in Curacao. And Ozzie Albies kind of came up through there, and he has a lot of respect for Andrew Jones. So I think Andrew could be good for those young guys. I think any of those older guys that have veteran, approaches could be great for those guys. In a few years, Freddie Freeman, could come back and be good for the young staff. Maybe help Bryce Ball out at first base or something. This is the 30th anniversary of when we turned it around and the great run began. Yeah, we're not going worst to first this year, but we might go all the way. Don't you think a 7-year, $35 million is a steal for Ozzie Albies? Absolutely, I think it's a steal. And I think 8-year, $100 million or whatever Acuna is making, whatever it is, it's not out of the ballpark. I think both of those deals are absolute sweetheart deals. And it's because they want to stay in Atlanta. They have a chance to win in Atlanta for the next 10 years. I always say, the people ask me all the time, do you think the Mets have a chance at winning, the National League East this year? Do you think the Phillies have a chance? Do you think the Marlins have a chance? They all have a chance. But I think the Braves have the best chance at winning a World Series for the next 10 years. And I'll stand by that. I think they are that well built for that long period of time, and there's no reason to think of a downfall. I personally don't think that. What do you think they give Freddie in years and money? I don't think it's going to happen this offseason. I think the Braves obviously had a huge revenue drop, and they're sort of working around that. Freddie, I think, is a guy who is going to get what he wants. He wants to stay in Atlanta. I think whatever deal he's on right now would suffice him personally. But they'll get a deal that's the right thing for him. 5-year $95 is, not bad. I don't know exactly what it will be. I'm not really, to tell you the truth, I'm not really a money guy. I'm more so of a time guy. How many years do I want to give you? And with Freddie, 5-year is about the ballpark, of right now. I think long-term, high money, 5-year $95 is not a bad look. 6 for $140, I don't know that I'm there yet. 23 a year, yeah, but is it backloaded or is it front-loaded or is it evenly spread? There's a lot of questions to be asked. I'm more so of a guy that likes to look at the deals after they're made and tell you what I think about them at that point. 5 for $95 is not bad. I just don't think it happens this year. I think it happens next year when his contract is over. And I know people are worried about that. I am not worried about Freddie Freeman running over and going to the Reds or something. I really think, frankly, that Freddie's not going anywhere. I think he wants to be a Brave for life. I think he really cherishes what Chipper did and holds that, to a high standard, and I think he wants to do that for himself in Atlanta. So I'm not worried about him going anywhere. $5.95 is fine. Whatever they give Freddie's going to be fine with me, honestly. If it was 7-year, I'd be okay with it. I hate to say it, but Freddie has done more than enough to earn whatever he's going to make with the Braves. And I don't necessarily want to see a Trevor Bauer deal, no offense, but I don't necessarily want to see a Trevor Bauer deal where he's making $40 million a year. Because that's kind of out. That's a bit much. But I think he's not going to try to break the bank. I think he's going to take a hometown discount call today, and I think that's going to be the end of it. Do we have a chance to re-sign Green after losing Melancon to the Padres? I've answered this question a couple times already. I'm going to answer this for you, but Melancon leaving did not surprise me. I was kind of hoping they would go get him again and get Shane Green. I think there's certainly a chance to re-sign him, but don't be surprised if they don't. I'd like to get him back. I personally would. I think he's one of the best relievers in the game right now. But if they don't get him, I think they have a lot of guys that they can go to. Huascar Noah is a guy that's kind of riding the edge of whether or not he's going to be in the bullpen tonight. Kyle Wright, Bryce Wilson. There's a lot of guys they could go to. And there's no reason to think a lot of those guys couldn't have an A.J. Minter type year, this coming up year. Is Soroka fully healed from last year's injury? I talked about this last broadcast the other day. Hang on just a second. I'll read you exactly what I know. Here it is. So, Grant McCauley tweeted basically that, they potentially he's going to be ready for opening day. He's not fully healed yet, but he's been throwing. We've seen him out there throwing. And there's no reason to think that he couldn't be ready for opening day. But if he is not for sure 100%, he is not going to play. They don't want to risk losing him for another year. So if he doesn't get there opening day, be patient. I'd rather see him 2 weeks later than see him on opening day not fully healed. So he's not fully healed yet, but he will be very soon. Trinity says she watched all of my interviews, and I appreciate that. And we should also bring Brian McCann in to teach our young catchers. Because we haven't had a great catcher since McCann. I would disagree. I think Travis d'Arnaud is pretty good himself. But I wouldn't mind bringing McCann in for sure. I think Freddie had his family love it here, and it feels like he wants to be a Brave lifer. Completely agree. So I think that's going to wrap it up, guys. I finally got to the end of the comments section. If you got anything else, you better get in it, because I am going to wrap it up. To give you one quick synopsis of what I talked about early on in this broadcast, we went through spring training look ahead. What I'm going to do with that, I will clip it and I will reshare it so you don't have to rewatch the entire live stream. You can just watch that part. If you want to see it, we talked about starting pitching success, what we need to see in spring training for that to happen, the bullpen competition, the bench competition, of course. what we need to see a repeat of what the offense did last year, specifically focusing on Austin Riley, Christian Pache, William Contreras, what they're going to be this year, and hopefully what we'll see in spring training. And again, the Mets are the biggest competition in the National League East, and I think the Braves take it personally. So that's going to wrap it up, guys. I appreciate you tuning in. I am going to get out of here, and that's going to wrap it up for today. So again, before you go, do me a favor. Like this video. Subscribe to this channel if you are new. And of course, tell your friends about this channel. It really makes a difference. I've seen the subscriber count grow. We're almost to 1,500, and that means the world to me. I get to talk about baseball to you guys all the time, and it just continues to grow. The stats are absolutely insane right now. I really appreciate that from you guys. Continue to tell your friends about this channel. Chad Davis, great job. And, of course, like this video. Get it out there. Tell your friends about it. Subscribe to this channel if you're new. I'm going to get out of here. I'm Tyler Redmond, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. I will see you next time on deck.